This is the Dane Moore NBA podcast brought to you by Prize Picks. Coming at you Thursday morning. It's January 4th. We'll discuss some Prize Picks later in the episode. Remember to use promo code Dane for a $100 sign-up bonus at prizepicks.com or the Prize Picks app. On today's show, I have Kyle Teige with me, and we are going to discuss the Wolves having lost 2 in a row after they lost to the Pelicans last night, their first time losing 2 in a row all season. We'll get into what Finch and some of the players said about what needs to get back kind of right for this team. I want to talk a little bit about Cat and him in particular unlocking more of this team. And then we'll talk a little bit about the Pelicans as a potential playoff matchup. Kyle, you told me you have a bunch of different stats. Mustacheless Kyle Teige, how are you?
Yeah, this is your fault, Chris Finch, if you're listening to this. Woke up at 5:30 a.m. on a Thursday to shave my face. Good morning. The vibes are low. They have lost consecutive regular season games for the first time since March 31st, 2023. And it might be over. Everything's broken. They're the worst offense in the league. They don't play defense. And we're close to a players-only meeting. On the 1-year anniversary, basically, of having a players-only meeting after that Pistons loss.
Are you serious? Was that, you're not joking?
Well, remember it was like New Year's Eve?
No, I'm talking about, are you serious? That
oh my God,
bad?
no.
Okay, well, I think like some people would be like...
The house is burned down, and then I looked, I was like, well, are they in the play-in still? It's like, oh, actually, they're first in the West. And I know that might be condescending to some. There are issues, and I think today I do actually have some numbers, and you have some great quotes, and there are issues. But to me, they're the same issues that we kind of identified throughout the season.
Yeah.
And all that really matters to me, man, is this 12-game stretch, because we are in this storm. I kind of tried to joke about this the other day on Flagrant Howls. We're in this storm that we all had predicted a storm was coming. Like we all said on December 11th, they have this 16-game stretch. If they could just go 8-8, let's all regroup on January 10th. Well, we wake up this morning and they're 7-5, right? Mm-hmm. So they really just, if they could find another win in this next 4-game kind of road trip, you would think they had hit the point that we had hoped they would hit a month ago. But I think the way they've hit that point, and then just the fact of, and there's some scar tissue here, them starting to regress and look clunky and look like basically the Gobert Towns experiment that we saw a year ago in those first 10 or so games before Karl went down. That's kind of how the offense looks. So things to get into, especially turnovers. I thought there was just some great quotes last night, especially from Ant.
Yeah, let me just play the Finch one I sent you about
that one was good
what needs
too.
to get better, and just to get things back on track. Here's Finch.
It's real kind of patch of adversity that you guys are hitting. How do you handle it, I guess, right?
Well, I mean, we got to get our desperation back. That's the first of all. I think we got to play better. We haven't played like with a lot of pop and purpose since we went to Sacramento. We've kind of been, maybe in second gear since then. So this performance had been coming for a while in the sense that we just hadn't been very sharp. There's going to be lots of ways of adversity. There's adversity in the game. There's adversity in the season. And this is just another one, but we got to fix it. We got to get our physicality back. Got to get our defense back. We got to get our identity back, which is like being more physical, being bigger.
Well, I guess that's the end of the quote.
He's lost his mind too. He's like, I don't know what to say anymore.
No, I guess I clipped that quote this morning and I forgot that's where I ended it.
It's early. It is very early.
It is very early. Actually, let me say that first here too. Normally Thursdays are the Brit pod. Brit's writing this morning. Bump Kyle up a day. I'm actually gonna be going out of town here for the next couple of days. So this will be the last pod this week until I guess Monday after the Mavs game. That'll be the next one coming up. But anyways, what needs to get better there? The thing that really stands out to me in that is what Finch kind of closed with there is we got to get our physicality back. We got to get our defense back. We got to get our identity back. What do you think? How do you think they do that, Kyle? Like how do you go from being a team who starts the season and one finds an identity, right? Finch talked about that pregame yesterday. It was like, we never found an identity last season. This year, we found our identity, and it's about sustaining it. Like, they found an identity early. It was a good one. They really embraced it for 20, 25 games or whatever it was. And now it seems like that's where the rope is slipping in some ways too, is losing some of that physicality and that size and that way that they were imposing themselves early in the year. That seems to kind of be showing up on both sides of the floor. Like what has to happen?
Well, the word that I like that Finch used was adversity, because I don't think this team had faced a lot of that this season. And back to your concept of like finding an identity and stuff. The reason a lot of people, and I get it, are starting to panic, especially after they finally join all their 29 teams or 30 teams in the league and have a losing streak, is that
are people really freaking out?
I think people are
panicking.
I really do. And
Yeah.
and I don't, again, not speaking for everyone, but I do think that people are freaking out. And the reason they're freaking out is because they followed this franchise for long enough that they can predict like old knees when it's about to rain, like, oh, it's starting to hurt a little bit. It's like, oh, I bet you it's going to rain.
They feel like arthritis.
Yeah, they feel like the Wolves' arthritis that rain is coming. And I get that as a fan. I'm more looking at it through the lens of an NBA fan, and all these teams ebb and flow. Like I'm really on this kick of looking at what the Nuggets did month in and month out last year, the defending champion Denver Nuggets. And they had a stretch of basketball, I think, from like middle of January to early February that was just like 500 ball. Or they had a stretch in December where it was like 2 losses, 1 win, 2 losses, 1 win. They had a couple of 3 or 4 game losing streaks. And it's just the ebbs and flow of all this stuff. And again, that's not an excuse. There are really bad numbers. If you want me to answer it succinctly, what can they do to stop this? Stop giving the ball to the other team. Yeah. They are 30th. I was telling you before this, like I looked at this 12-game stretch because, again, that's, to me, all that really matters right now. It'll get easier. There's a lot of Pistons coming up. That'll be a new challenge, right? Like, are the Wolves with this new identity able to continuously beat the bad teams? That's what doomed them last year. But over this last 12-game stretch that they're 7-5, 30th in turnovers, just straight 30th in turnovers, 28th on the season. They're 30th in turnover percentage, which is almost 2 percentage points worse than 29th. Which
is like a huge amount when it's like 16%, right? So it's like it is. Yeah,
it's like first is 11, and then second's 11.1, and then 11.2, and then it's like the Wolves are like 101. They're just way away from everyone else. So the 30th in turnover percentage, 28th on the season. On the season, that's only ahead of Utah and Detroit, 2 teams that we would deem are very bad. They're 30th over this 12-game stretch in assist to turnover ratio at like just north of 1. So basically. And I think the first place team is like 2.6. So it's not a huge difference in the numbers, but it's pretty big if every time I have an assist, I'm going to follow it up with a turnover. Or if every time I have 2 assists, I'm going to then just have 1 turnover. And that same stretch, they're 19th in offense, or 19th in offensive rating, 4th in defensive rating. So even though they're playing all teams above 500 and all teams that are in the playoffs, that defensive identity is still there, even though, last night, again, it kind of slipped against the Pelicans or whatever. And then the ones that really stand out to me, turnovers. We just said it. They are last in the league during this stretch in every turnover metric you can find. They're 28th in 3 points attempted and 25th on the season, but they're 4th in 3-point percentage and 5th on the season. So they don't take them, but when they do take them, they make them. And they don't take them sometimes because they're just handing the ball off to the other team who is in scoring in transition. To me, those 6 or 7 stats are like, okay, I'm not that concerned. If we could just stop turning the ball over, and now you can hop in here and be smart and be like, well, how are they going to execute more on offense? How are they going to do that? If they could just cut down their turnovers and take more threes, I think that offensive rating goes from 19th to like 12th. And that might be good enough to make a run, right? You would love to be top 10 in both, but if they can just be...
They were 13th before...
Yeah, exactly, or 11th for a while.
Stretch. Yeah, I just remember looking it up, and before this difficult run, which actually started, this 12-game stretch you're talking about is bookended by 2 Pelicans losses. Mm-hmm. That's where it started, and then last night they lost to them as well. They were like a slightly above average offensive team with still a lot of the same offensive issues back then.
Yeah.
I actually think the defense is really tying in to the offense, and that kind of is somewhat incongruent with the numbers that you're having there. I think a lot of the really strong offensive bursts from this team were inspired by a really strong defensive play, right? I think about the beginning, earlier in the season, and it felt like every Rudy block led into a fast break like Nasri or Anthony Edwards dunk, and I think because this isn't a perfect offensive team, a team that turns the ball over too much, a team that, lacks shooting and spacing, and just they don't really have personnel to be a great half court offensive team. So to be, an above average offensive team, I think it's really important that the defense kind of inspires that. And it did at the beginning of the year, and it isn't right now, but I do kind of buy into some of that cliche of like, it's kind of hard to play defense like that for 82 games, the way they were. And they do, like Finch said, they got to get back to it. But it makes sense to me that not all 33 games or whatever have looked the way the first 8 did defensively, because, I think it's a difficult thing to do. And what needs to happen then, if the defense can't be that 10 out of 10 that it was all the time, then the offensive shot making just needs to happen, right? And that needs to be, you need Ant to step up there. You need Carl to play some of his most efficient basketball. You need to not be turning the ball over as much. So I just don't think they're doing this thing of balancing it well. When the defense drops a little bit, you need the offensive shot making to go up. If the offense drops, the defense needs to be more spiked, and it just doesn't feel like it is right now.
But if we can go back to, again, I've got 6 statistics here, which is 7 more than I've had all season. 28th in 3 points attempted, and they're 4th in percentage. Like, you're a smart basketball person. I learn a lot from, like, tell me what to do with that, because it's a basic thing of, like, they don't take a lot, but when they do take them, they make them. And I'll be honest, I'll even slip into tinfoil hat mode a little bit. It's like, how many of these guys know, like, that they're close to 50, 40, 90? How many of these guys know, like, because I think sometimes the efficiency, and I think this is a league-wide problem. This is, like, I always hate, Dane, when these guys don't take half-court shots at the end of a quarter, right? I know that if I take 12 of them over a season, it's going to lower my percentage a little bit. Who cares? Like, hitting a 3 seems like momentum building way more than it is. It's not going to hurt my contracts or whatever. Mm-hmm. But why don't these guys take more threes?
Yeah, I mean, I had that thought yesterday too, of just, I mean, to me, they absolutely need more spacing, and they need Carl to do that, and Carl needs to go into the corner sometimes.
You know what the play of the week was? I don't know if you talked about this yet. I'm still catching up on the pods. By the way, go subscribe. Great pods. Carl sprinting into in transition, sprinting into a 3-pointer against the Knicks to cut it to 4 late in the fourth quarter. That was the quickest release I think I've ever seen him have for his shot. It looked unguardable. He just got the ball at half court, took 2 or 3 dribbles, and just let it fly. That was the first time I've seen that since Rudy Gobert got here. They're not really related, but I mean, why wouldn't you just 2 or 3 more of those a game? Like that in and of itself, a quick early shot, 6 seconds into, you get a defensive rebound, 18 on the shot clock, Carl just lets it fly. You have now avoided a turnover and had 1 more 3-point shot. And you're 4th in the league in making them. So, I mean, those are just little intricacies of, like, let's just fire up some more threes in transition. Mike's good at it. Ant's good at it. That would be a simple way, because, again, to your point, there's structure and there's all these conversations about running more plays and more sets. I don't know. Maybe that's not the answer, right? Because maybe that's how they're turning the ball over sometimes. Maybe they just need to let it fly when they get the defensive rebound, and that could help some of these problems.
Yeah, no, I mean, Carl's shooting the fewest threes of his career since the general soreness Jimmy Butler year.
And that's on Finch, I think. I mean, I really do. Like, I have to be honest when I'm tweeting out his Coach of the Year odds and saying I'm maybe the most pro-Finch person. At some point, you just have to get, because to me, it's like, if they're not going to get more out of Carl from taking threes, and you already have Mike kind of scoring a little more and Ant's hunting 30 every night, it's either Carl has to play more, or we need to make a trade, or, like, I don't know what happened to Troy Brown Jr. I don't know if the resolution was to not play basketball anymore, but he came in last night in garbage time, but he has a quick release. He digs in for defensive rebounds. I don't know what happened to the rotation, and I'd like to talk about that more in a little bit too. But
I just don't think the answer of needing to establish spacing and shooting needs to be about the 8th and 9th men or whatever. Like, yeah,
sure,
Kyle
yeah.
Anderson is part of it, and he's not shooting threes, and that, we've talked about this so many times, but like messes up your spacing and stuff because he's not playing out of the corners. I mean, it is really jarring to me when I watch the rest of the NBA, how much more those teams utilize the corners compared to the Wolves. And it seems like a small thing, but like, to your point, this isn't necessarily a bad 3-point shooting team. It's not the volume. Well, that's the place that you can get more volume to come from, particularly when you have Anthony Edwards initiating offense, getting doubled. That is almost always then a couple swings away from being a corner 3-point shot. But Karl Anthony Towns has only made 2 corner threes the entire season. That I don't understand that. But what I try to understand it, I think Karl has made a lot of concessions, right? In the past now year and a half of moving to power forward, which comes with a whole litany of challenges for him that are different than previously. And he's also he's kind of had to cede his position, right? Center. He's also kind of had to cede his number 1 in the pecking order status to Ant. And then, whether it's conscious or not, like maybe subconsciously, it feels like, maybe to him, it feels like a major relegation into like full-on role player status to be in the corner. And in your head, you're like, am I just PJ Tucker on this team?
Yeah.
Like, you know what I'm saying? And I would get that. I get that from Karl's perspective. But at the same time, I ask myself, like, who else is going to do it? Who else on the team can at least, and again, it doesn't need to be all 48 minutes, but how can you establish some spacing early in the game so as to be able to have the offense kind of rolling, and you don't have those 5-6 turnovers in the first quarter, and you start in a positive way, and then maybe pull Karl back into the delay at the top of the key, or you find him in the post and that. But I think this team needs more of that, playing out of the corner. Ant could play out of the corners a little bit more too. Mike could initiate. They're missing the spacing that a quote unquote normal team has, or the rest of the teams around the league have. And I just think I don't know where that starts other than with Cat.
Everyone got really triggered when Karl said he was the best shooting big man of all time. And they mostly got triggered because they're like, have you heard of Dirk Nowitzki? I got triggered because since then, if you called yourself, if you texted me and said, I'm the greatest podcaster of all time, and you recorded once a week, I'd kick you. Like, it's like, you're the best and you're doing it once a week. Like, that's not a thing. So if you're the best shooting big man of all time.
Waiters, right?
Yeah, definitely. Jamal Crawford, Jordan Crawford, all those Crawfords. Like, you just got to let it fly more. And again, I'm still very pro Finch. I see what some of the skeptics, kind of how they show that his offense has moments where it's just no one's doing anything and it's just a lot of dribbling. But to me, it's like that's like the happy medium of leaning way too much into structure, way too much into flow, is just finding ways in transition, if you do have this defensive identity, to get your players, especially Karl, more opportunities in transition. Just let it fly. I mean, last night, and we can go to break, last night was crazy because every player on the roster, except for Rudy Gobert, obviously, got the ball in a good spot to take a three, pump faked and dribbled into the pressure. Every one of them. It's like a new drinking game. It's like, why are we all pump faking and turning down what are essentially probably good looks in an opportunity, I guess, to find great looks? But those great looks don't really exist. They don't exist with the space. I mean, Jaden McDaniels last night was contested on a fall-away jumper by Rudy Gobert in the first half. Like, the spacing is broken, and they just need to let some of those shots go up. If nothing else, an experiment. Like, let's get 10 more threes and then see what happens.
All right, Kyle, like you said, let's grab our first break here. This is a new sponsor we have, Stone and Skillet. This is one of the cooler, for me, like, experiences of somebody reaching out to want to advertise, because I already owned. I already had these at my
Right,
house.
yeah.
When they sell Stone and Skillet English muffins at Whole Foods, and I live by Whole Foods, and so I shopped there. And when they reached out and were like, "Hey, would you like to sponsor English muffins?" I'm like, "What? One, I love English muffins. Two, I actually already have Stone and Skillet English muffins, and I don't know, it might seem silly to some people that we're advertising English muffins, but it's
a career highlight for me. This is why I do it. This is why I log in every day to podcast.
They sent you some. They sent you and me both like a holiday pack of these.
It was like a treasure chest full of carbs. It was delicious.
I know. So over Christmas, we were both consuming a great many of these Stone and Skillet English muffins, and I know. I mean, I was eating them all the time. It's kind of like a family tradition of mine. We make like eggs Benedict on Christmas morning, so I brought these over, and I was like, "Hey, I have a treasure chest of English muffins. Like, you could leave the other ones in there." I actually I don't really understand that an English muffin could be like all that different, but these are very good, and they're just there's a lot more to them. Like it doesn't feel like they're full of air. There's 6 grams of protein. They're healthy. They're non-GMO certified, more nutritious, and like there's like they're dense, and it's cool because they make these daily. They're hand flipped and cornmeal crusted, and while it's an indulgence, right, to be eating something like that, what I like is there's like a couple mornings I just made that, and I was like, with some jam or butter on it, I'm like, I kind of am full, whereas normally if I were to eat a piece of toast or something, I'd be like, all right, I need this and this.
I'm hungrier somehow.
Right,
yeah.
right. So I've been loving them, and I love Stone and Skillet's kind of story too. You and I are big fans of kind of companies that start off entrepreneurially, and this has been a company that was founded 10 years ago in Boston by 3 brothers. One of them was working in kind of restaurant sales and stuff, and was always getting requests for more English muffins or better English muffins. So they started this company, Stone and Skillet. They were making them by hand on a granite countertop, and in a cast iron skillet. Thus the name Stone and Skillet. So I just think it's a cool story. They've kind of branched out to Minnesota. They're in Whole Foods here now after becoming very popular in the Boston area, and being in Whole Foods kind of on the East Coast. So I think it's a cool sponsor. I think it's an easy, cheap sponsor to be able to like support.
That's my thing.
If you're a listener, and go ahead.
It's we're not trying to sell you cars, right? This is just a local, or not local, but getting into the market, just a cool kind of small company that's exploded, and it's English muffins. And I think it's the best English muffin I've ever had.
Yeah.
Because I ate one. I mean, again, honestly, I got a treasure chest of like 40 of them, and I just eat one every day. I was like counting down to Christmas. I would just pull one out. Just like, oh, cool, cinnamon raisin. It's like one of those calendars with the chocolates. So totally. It's a cool story. It's just like other restaurants and other companies we've partnered with in the past that have a cool story, but it's also an elite product that it's a pack of English muffins. Like you said, you can get them at Whole Foods. You can get them online. I know you have a promo code to get a little discount. There was like literally nothing better, I swear to God, as someone who loves food, than just getting like English muffins sent in the mail to me. Like that was the best Christmas gift I have received. And yeah, they're delicious. So we're not trying to sell you something that's like sketchy. It's the best product out there. And it also has a lot of, like you said, protein, and it's handmade. Everyone is flipped by a real person. This isn't AI. So local product, cool product, and use promo code. What is it?
Yeah, stoneandskillet.com. If you want to order them and have them delivered, you can get 20% off with promo code Dane. Again, that's stoneandskillet.com. Or they're just at Whole Foods in the bread section. You can go over there. You're not going to get 20% off doing that. But yeah, we would just love if you, as always, support the sponsors that support us. So
they don't suck, but you know what does suck? The Timberwolves, according to Anthony Edwards. Good transition back.
Yes. Ant after the game, echoed sort of some of the frustration that, that this hasn't been working for this team of late. I'll start by playing that clip from Ant after the game, and then I just want to kind of get more into the Pelicans matchup in particular.
Like you guys are in a bit of a funk right now, or how do you kind of come out of it? It looks like it.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got to figure it out. We suck right now.
Yeah. What do you think is the biggest issue right now?
It's within the team. I mean, nothing I'm gonna say here, but we talk.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
In terms of, Mike was saying that he thought you guys have had so much success all season.
It's becoming a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You agree with that?
Hell yeah.
What is that? How do you see it the most out there?
I mean, we looking at the same game. I think all y'all see it. But we're gonna figure it out.
What's your reaction to that, Kyle?
I think there's, I don't know if this is another clip, but one of the things he added to is like getting that edge back defensively. And he talked about, he's like, man, I don't know. It's on us because the coaches do a great job bringing the game plan and making sure we're prepared. And the rest of it is on us. They keep asking us to play hard and they shouldn't have to say it. We got to figure it out. You were in the locker room. That was the point that I just wanted to flip back to you because I'm curious because as I do think there's a little panic, right? I do think the arthritis is kicking in and the rain might be coming. People just, you turn to what can I blame? And I think a lot of times it's blame Finch. And I get it now, right? I've said some of the things that are wrong with this offense. But I also always hear these quotes where it's like the question could be about something completely random and Ant and other guys will come back to being like, the coaching staff is telling us to do this. They're on us to do this. We're just not doing it. Do you agree with that? Because Ant's not PR talk. Like he's not trained to just say that stuff. It's like coming to him. So do you believe that the coaching staff is trying to get through to these guys? I mean, no one was less enthused about this winning streak or this performance than Chris Finch, right? He was like, we haven't really done anything. So do you believe that behind the scenes, the coaching staff is kind of digging into them to be like, hey, we need to get better at this, or what do you think it is?
Yeah, well, I do think a lot of it is on the players to execute, right? And, part of just the turnovers, like you were referencing so much, it's like so much of that is Ant and Cat, right? And what are you doing, Ant and Cat, that are consistently leading to turnovers, whether it's charges or live ball turnovers, more so from Ant there. And I think that's like a perfect example of how it's both, right? It's the players and it's the coaching. Ant and Carl need to read the floor better and not put themselves. Ant had 6 turnovers again last night. I think he leads the league in total turnovers this season. That's on Ant and the others to execute around him, but it's also, again, on the coaches to put, maybe if you see Ant in, a situation where he's playing in a crowd too often and turning the ball over, maybe an adjustment needs to have, again, drink better spacing, and to be able to do that. So I think part of it is maybe the coaches putting them in better position to not hurt themselves, but a lot of it is just a better. Some of those turnovers from Ant just kind of seem like, oh, my drive is done, a little bit deflated and a casual pass. And I think he, just needs to do a better job of that. I think his teammates need to do a better job of putting him in a position to have an advantage. I think the coaches are articulating those things to them, but yeah, there's been like a mentality shift from Ant in many ways to be a little bit more aggressive, which is leading to that. I think there's been a little bit of slippage, like we were talking about, on both ends from some of the other best players on the team, and that's not just Carl. I think Rudy hasn't been the elite defender that they were before. It's just an overall sort of slippage, and I think what Ant is saying there is we all need to play harder and we need to play better. The coaches are telling us to do that. I think the them playing better part, though, is both on the coaches and them. Right, to put them in those positions, but the playing harder part, right? That's just in that locker room. I think that's what Ant's saying.
And you're in that locker room every night. It seems like a tight locker room. Again, they're 24-9. Probably worth bringing that up. Do you think Ant right now trusts his teammates? Because one thing, again, 6 turnovers again last night. I always have the Luke Ridnour thing about I don't really care who is on the team. I just like cheering for the team. I want the team to have success. When I watch Ant, it's not all on him. It's not all on Kyle, right? Kyle's not the core of all these problems. Either is Carl or either is Ant. But those turnovers, in my mind, when I watch it, is just him isoing and going 1-on-3. And he'll be out there in a rotation that also has like, I mean, last night they played Jordan McLaughlin and Kyle Anderson together. And then if you have, Rudy, and it doesn't matter if Steph's out there, that is a really bad shooting lineup.
Yeah.
And I just wonder if he, as this has snowballed a little bit, right? And now there's some adversity, he seems like the first person on the hierarchy that's like, I can fix this. But his fixing it is actually making it worse. So it's not all on him either, but his ability.
That's the mentality after the
OKC game.
After the OKC game, he just, we've said this on every episode since then, he just said, I'm going to be more aggressive and go to my shot more. And what that means to do that is you need to go deeper into the teeth of the defense where it's easier to commit turnovers. And the teeth of the defense is so much more compact now because there is not the respect for the Wolves at the 3-point line surrounding Ant. So it is a situation where like teams aren't like really doing the double above the 3-point line on Ant anymore. Like I think Ant gets that. He's like, all right, I'm 28 feet away from the basket. You're putting 2 on me. I understand. I get off the ball here and it should be swing, something in the corner, Rudy lob, whatever. But it hasn't felt like that as much where it's more been like the swarm has been around Ant at like 16 feet. So even if he does effectively get the kick out there, it's the space isn't there. The floor has been condensed. And even when they're not turning it over and they're getting through the double teams or the crowds, it isn't leading to as easy of looks, it feels like to me.
Yeah, last night was a great. I love how Britt said it in the fourth quarter. Ant was kind of levining because it really was. It just the game was kind of over. I know they only lost by like 11, but it was over basically when the fourth quarter started. But he just kind of started hunting his own shot, and he is obviously an all-world offensive player. But it kind of goes back to when I was like, hey, if I told you that the Wolves were at full strength and Carl had 30, you'd be like, well, they probably won that game. I would love to be like, okay, they're at full strength and had 9 assists. Yeah. You'd probably be like, yeah, they probably won that game. So he finished with 5 again last night, 6 turnovers. There's just, I think now that this adversity is hitting, something that you and I were kind of calling for. It's like, I would love to see them lose 2 in a row. I'd love to see them get punched in the face.
I'd love it, but we're interested to see the way in which they respond. Yeah.
And they've now lost 2 games in a row, and it does seem like the response has been individually. And Rudy kind of said the same thing last night, that, okay, I can fix this. Carl, like, I can just drive to the basket more. I can start to get creative with my passing. No, we don't like that. Ant, like, I can just take everyone off the dribble and get to the rim. He's still getting a tough whistle. I mean, I think we've talked about officiating enough. I think it's just bad across the whole league. It was bad again last night on both sides, but I just don't think those are the answers. I think the answers are, like, if this is hell, to kind of keep going through it, but keep going through it with your teammates, and not trying to just do it by yourself. But I've taken you 33 minutes into this. There's some real meat on the bone from last night's Pelicans game that I kind of want to talk to you about too, because I think that is I would guess you would agree, but that might be, as I'm starting to figure out, okay, I still think, yes, they're going to make the playoffs, probably in a top 4 to 6 seed. I don't think they want to play the Pelicans, though.
Yeah. That's
a tough matchup.
Yeah, and it is a tough matchup. And they've lost to the Pelicans pretty convincingly both of the times that Zion plays. It's weird that we're this early into the season and they're done playing. They've already played the Pelicans 4 times. I just kind of was going through that last night after the game. It's like, okay, first time they played the Pelicans on November 8th, they destroyed them. Remember, like, Matt Ryan played like 30 minutes. It was no Zion, no CJ McCollum, no Herb Jones, no Jose Alvarado, no Najee Marshall, and the Wolves were at full strength. There was a target center. They killed them. Then the second time they play them, they go to New Orleans and they win 121-120. The Wolves do. It's a back-to-back for the Pelicans. They also didn't have Zion in that game. Again, didn't have McCollum. Again, didn't have Alvarado. Wolves were healthy. Now, these last 2 times that they've played them, the Pelicans have been healthy, and I think at not last night, but the previous time when they played against Zion and the Pelicans, it was right after that in-season tournament, and Zion had like 37, 38 in that game, and it was kind of like everybody had been ripping on Zion for the past week, and he kind of took it out on the Wolves, but Ant wasn't in that game. And so you're kind of like, all right, I still don't really understand who the Pelicans are, right? Because I haven't seen them that much. They haven't seen themselves that much at that time. And you're like, okay, Ant didn't play. They lose by 14 in New Orleans. Okay. And then, last night it was two teams at full strength. It was a back-to-back for the Pelicans, but they kind of sat all their guys in the second half of their game on Wednesday night. It didn't really feel like credit to the Pelicans. Didn't really feel like a back-to-back performance for them, but they lost that. So it's 2-2. Beat the Pelicans both times. They didn't have Zion and lost to them the two times they did. And I think this is, for me, an extension kind of the Knicks game of a weakness that this team has, is being able to defend those scoring fours. And I know Julius Randle is a little bit different than Zion Williamson is. There's part of the pull-up game in there with Randle that Zion doesn't have. But it doesn't feel like the Wolves really have an answer for guarding that type of player. I found it interesting that they approached the Zion matchup so differently than they did the Julius Randle matchup. It was all Cat and Kyle on Julius Randle on whenever that game was on New Year's Day. And then right away last night, they put Ant on Zion as the matchup. And then Naz Reid was the other guy who guarded him. A little bit of Kyle Anderson in there too. I thought I like the Ant on Zion part of that. I think that's the best matchup that this team has for that type of scoring four. If it's a Sabonis or an Embiid, right, you're going to put Gobert on him. But they don't want to give Zion that runway leading up. So they had Ant out there pressed up on Zion. They had Naz picking him up at like half court. And I thought it was interesting. Obviously, it wasn't a good game. Wolves got smoked last night. But I like the idea of trying different things, particularly in an element of the game that appears to be a weakness for them. It's like, all right, let's see what can Naz do. Like, Naz hasn't been a good defender this year. Could have Naz had his Wendell Moore game on John Morant? Like that's what you were. No, I mean that's what you were. That's what Finch was hoping for, and I still don't think they have an answer for that. And maybe there just aren't great answers for a Julius Randle and a Zion Williamson. But what I really take from this matchup, and again, potentially thinking about it for the playoffs, is like, that's where it starts, is you need to figure out what your best means for starting and slowing Zion Williamson is, and then go from there. Because there's other issues on that team. I mean, Valanciunas didn't really do anything last night, but that's an offensive rebounding threat around him, right? Brandon Ingram is a huge three who, is about the same size as Jaden. Jaden can't really shut that off in the way that he can shut off other people. CJ McCollum is a totally offensive weapon there too, that I don't feel like the Wolves have given how they're matching up elsewhere. Like, you'd like to put Jaden McDaniels on CJ McCollum, but you need to put Jaden McDaniels on Brandon Ingram. So it's not a great matchup for the Wolves. And if these two teams do match up in the playoffs, I'm not saying it's like a loss for sure, but there's a lot of other teams in that same sort of good team tier in the West as the Pelicans are, that I feel like this team matches up better against.
Yeah, they have a lot of what the Wolves have, right? Like you said, like obviously there's a weak comparisons, but like Valanciunas is a great rebounder and can attack the offensive glass and is a paint presence. It's kind of what Rudy is. They even have, Jose Alvarado is just Jordan McLaughlin on speed, right? But it's funny that you bring up the Zion Ant thing. I'm with you. I don't think Ant is necessarily the strongest player on the team just in general, but per capita for his size, he's probably the strongest guy. So putting him on New Orleans' strongest player was a really interesting wrinkle.
I like that. I liked it.
And then also too, and I don't know if this is possible. I don't know if you can be born in a coma, but if I was born in a coma and I just woke up yesterday and that was the first day of all basketball I watched, I would be hard pressed to not say like, hey, is Brandon Ingram the best player in the league? Because his shot making, I mean, I don't know what it is. Like, honestly, I would do a whole podcast just on Brandon Ingram. Like, he should be like a top 10 guy. He is basically, I know we've comped it to Kevin Durant a little bit, but maybe we can pull that one back. But like if Jaden McDaniels could be $1.50 store Brandon Ingram, his handle, his ability to just point at the floor and be like, I want to get a shot from there and then just make it. I mean, he still kind of crushes you in the mid range, but it's another one. So like Zion's just bigger than Ant, and Brandon Ingram's just kind of, I think, maybe bigger than Jaden or on that same sphere. So they don't really have the like matchup advantages in a lot of spots. I guess the one that I would think of is like they're probably going to put a Herb Jones or I don't know, Trey Murphy on like Carl. So you would think that's got to be our advantage. Carl's bigger than him. They can take him off the dribble, can just space. But it was weird last night. I don't know if I would say the Pelicans are like the number one threat, because at some point the Denver Nuggets probably need to get some respect. But
it is interesting given that you go like, oh, I know how the Wolves match up with Denver. Like, you're going to put Cat on him, and you're going to have Gobert lurk off of Gordon, and you're going to trust that, Jaden McDaniels and Nickeil Alexander-Walker do a good job of limiting Jamal Murray. There's a greater confidence in the game plan, I think, against Denver. It doesn't mean that Denver's a worse team than New Orleans, but it's just an interesting thing with this Wolves roster as it's constituted, is like some different matchups fit them better. And when we have these playoff conversations, if it's a Pelican series, we're gonna have a lot of things of like, these are 3, 4, 5 things where you're like, this is what the Wolves need to answer here. And I do think while the game last night wasn't a success, I liked some of the things that they tried. And I do think against a big team, you need to move the ball well. And while that was terrible in the second half, I thought they moved the ball really well in the first half. And they were getting good looks. They weren't making them. And that just kind of comes with it. But I think, you just got to solve the Zion matchup. You got to move the ball offensively to generate good looks against a big, kind of slow-footed team. And you need to find little adjustments and pivots that help you. I thought it was really interesting that, when was the last time we saw Naz Reid just playing center with both Cat and Rudy not on the floor? You wouldn't think that like part of your brain goes, well, why would that be the first time that happens for extended minutes against the biggest team in the league in the Pelicans? I was like, okay, that's Finch's way and this roster's way of being like, maybe our best thing to do here is to go faster against them.
Yep.
We've seen other teams do that to us, and that hurts our big identity at times. Then went with Naz at the 5 for a good chunk, which really played Valanciunas off the floor. I don't know if Valanciunas is not one of the most important pieces on that, but you're like, okay, the Wolves kind of can break the Pelicans' identity there by going a little bit smaller. Then went a little bit smaller again by having Jordan McLaughlin play. I just wrote that down. I was like, interesting counter to playing a really big team as a really big team yourself by leaning into the smaller elements and faster elements of your identity. And just because that game was a blowout, it doesn't make me disagree with those moves, having Ant on them, playing smaller and faster sometimes. I think if we are doing a playoff preview down the line of this matchup, you go, okay, well, these are some weapons that the Wolves have too against this team that, it's not all a disadvantage here. It's just, you got to kind of balance out the stakes a little bit.
Yeah, I kind of, this is related to what you said, because you've said it 3 times now about how Finch was just trying some new stuff. Right. And I don't think that always maybe comes across unless you kind of point it out, because, end of the day, they lose a game and they're kind of getting blown out. So I guess Finch tried some stuff and it didn't work. What is the goal of this season? Would be like my real overarching 2024, the final 50 some games question is like, what is this team's goal? Is it to get the 1 seed in the regular season? Because then you probably should stop experimenting. That should no ways be the goal. The goal should be to get a top 4 seed in the West. Target Center is now what? You're still 14-2 at home. You want to have a home playoff series, not one of these play-in situations again. You want to be at home for the first round and then maybe, a second round. And if that is your goal, your intended goal of let's just try to be top 4 in the West, they should continue to try to experiment with things. Again, it didn't go well last night, but the Jordan McLaughlin thing is an experiment, right? And there are some negatives to playing him. He can't space the floor, but he gives you that Alvarado kind of jolt. And one thing that Jim and Grady pointed out last night, and they're on the buses with these guys, they're on the planes with these guys, is they kind of look exhausted. And I know people don't love that when it comes to athletes and millions of dollars, but they're in this storm, right? They're on the final quarter, final chapter of this 16-game stretch, and maybe they are just a little tired and burnt out. And I would hope, and I ranted about this last week, that Finch would continue to try things. I don't know if Leonard Miller is going to get a chance. I know he had a career high in the G League last night, but he also got ejected a week ago for throwing the ball into the stands. Like, maybe it's not Leonard Miller and Josh Minot and Wendell Moore, and we can save this for the last segment, but I would bring back Shake Milton. I would bring back Troy Brown Jr. I would just try to get a little burst and jolt out of who's on the bench, because if you're not going to play those guys and you're kind of going through hell now and you're going to keep going, if those guys aren't going to help you, then that answers the whole conversation about a month from now at the trade deadline. Like, then they got to go. You got to go find someone else that can give you a little bit of a jolt, because this team has kind of milked everything they can right now from the starting five. And I still think that's a great starting five. I think they can win you a playoff series, but they need a little jolt right now. And who's going to give it to them?
Yeah, it's interesting. I had that thought too of like, there's elements of last night's game or multiple of the last few games where you go, oh, they could use some of Jordan McLaughlin's pace and activity that he brings into the group. You also go, well, this team could have also used some more shooting, right? Over these last few games, or it's like since Christmas. They could have also, like, transitions really dried up. They could have used more of that. Well, it's like, okay, Jordan McLaughlin adds that pace. Troy Brown Jr. adds some shooting. Shake Milton, that's what he kind of brings is that transition element, playing against a shifted defense. And I'm not sure those are great answers for all of those things, but they're the answers that this team currently has. And what I'm thinking is, what if it were multiple of them? What if you had J-Mac playing and also Shake Milton playing, to get two elements of that, or Jordan McLaughlin and Troy Brown, or Troy Brown and Shake Milton to do that. That's not going to happen because they're not going to go to 10 guys and there just isn't minutes to do it. And it makes me be like, I'd be interested if Jordan McLaughlin and Troy Brown both played in a game off of the bench, what that would bring. And if Kyle Anderson didn't play. And I'm not suggesting that Kyle should get benched just because I kind of know he's not going to. But there's part of me that's like, oh, if it was a back-to-back or something like that, or, back spasms or something popped up for Kyle again. I'm curious what this would look like a game where Kyle didn't play. Does that make sense? Where it's like, all right, we know Kyle Anderson brings a lot of positive things to this team. But if we remove those positive things and we remove the negative things that he's bringing right now in terms of his spacing and shot making and that sort of stuff, what would that look like? And I think given what this team is struggling with right now, you could make a case that it would be helpful, even if I don't love the options that would come in to replace him in Brown, Milton, and McLaughlin. But it's something I've been thinking about.
Again, what is the goal here? Was this team built? Was this push the chips in to try to win 55 games? Or was it to break this hideous playoff curse? Because to me, it's like, they're 24-9. This has been the greatest start in all 35-year history of the franchise. We're not even 50% through the season. And you just had your first 2-game losing streak. Everything's crumbling down around you, and you look up and you're still first in the West, and you're still, 4 games up on like the 5 seed. So this experimenting thing you're talking about, I'm with it, and I'm with you on the lean into it even further. Don't just try one, every player in this rotation clearly does something well. But there are some guys at this current moment that probably have more negatives than they do positives. So why not just try switching things up? And that's probably the biggest criticism of a Finch would be he's a little more Tibbs than he is a little more, wild professor experimenter guy, is that he's just going to kind of lean into the guys that got him there. And I just thought it was really eye-opening because Jim and Grady said it, I think 3 times on the call last night. These guys kind of look exhausted. And if that's the case, I think other teams around the league, I said this last week, the Celtics play a bunch of random guys. They're the best team in the league. Like, they just throw out, the Hausers and the 10-day guys just to give them a little spark. find a spark. Like, find a spark, and it might not have to go all the way down to the guys you don't trust, Leonard Miller, Luka Garza, Wendell Moore, but Troy Brown Jr. or Jordan McLaughlin and Shake. Just try to get weird with it a little bit, because you might lose a couple games, right? But there's still 50-some left to figure out, and you're probably going to find your groove again in March or April, so that'd be a way to fix it.
I do think that's Finch's mentality, just from when we were at practice the other day. He basically said J-Mac was going to play and take that ninth spot in the rotation, but he also followed it up with, like, we're going to go back to Shake at times, and we're going to go back to Troy Brown Jr. at times. Like, this isn't so I think there is an open-mindedness based on, not even really based on matchup, but like based on what the team is struggling with at the time, which that's why I think J-Mac made sense last night. His team's been turning the ball over a ton. They've slowed down, bogged down offensively. So it's like, okay, yeah, that makes sense to be a Jordan McLaughlin time. Maybe there is a time where somebody else makes sense. But I think we're spending all this time talking about the ninth man and that 12-minute a night role and wanting that to have some profound impact. And it's not going to. That's too small of a role to have a profound impact. It's kind of, to me, feeling like with that second unit, something, and I don't know what the answer is, something bigger has to happen to get them to be a better offensive group in those sort of ways. And, maybe just some of it's coaching and stuff too. I don't think the offense has been really clean. I did think, though, like the last thing I had on here is the defense, right? The defense has pretty much sustained in terms of effectiveness, even over this. They were, before this difficult stretch, they were number one. Would you say they're like four or 5 or 6 or something like that? Like, and I find myself frustrated with a lot of the things the Wolves are doing offensively, and pointing to some things that I think make sense in my head offensively to do differently. And so that's, right, in some ways inherently indictment or questioning of Finch. But defensively, they found a diversity of styles with which to play. They haven't been as sharp with that. But prior to last night, they've been kind of continuing to play really good and consistent defense. And it's nice that provides a little bit of a floor for this team right now. But last night you learned, if you don't have that floor, which they didn't in that one game, maybe because they were tired, the bottom can really sort of drop off. It's their 4 worst defensive games of the season thus far this year in order of points per possession allowed. Is the worst one was the Phoenix game when they went there in the back-to-back. Again, tired and kind of got smoked there. The Oklahoma City game was the next worst defensive game, which also kind of felt like a back-to-back, but the front end of the back-to-back was Christmas. The third worst game defensively was the Atlanta game. That was just having no answer for DeJounte Murray in the second half of that game there. And then last night against the Pelicans was the 4th worst defensive game in terms of points per possession allowed. But I do have like a confidence that this Wolves defense, the expectation is above competence every single night. Like that to me is more of like, I look at those bad games and I look at, that's kind of like more of a flash in the pan. Now they do need to get back to some of the things that they were doing better defensively before, right? Because the defense leads the offense. But I just find myself frustrated with some of the things that Finch is doing or not doing as a coach offensively. And I think a good balancing point is to remember he's made a really good defense work here, a diverse defense work. They found ways to make the Rudy lineups work, the Cat lineups work, they're continuing broadly to be a good defensive team, which has made them 7-5 in this 12-game stretch, even when the offense has been dismal.
But this kind of all summarizes to why I'm not at the top, right? I do think there are people concerned, and I get that. But when you look at, I have a third of a Word document open, it's like, you start to look at these numbers, and 7-5 stretch over the last 12, a stretch of games that have been against some of the best, and people are concerned. And I would have guessed, if I would have asked you this, like, what do you think the defensive rating is? I would have imagined you might have thought, or a listener might have thought it's worse than fourth. So it slipped, but it's still the fourth best, essentially defense in the league. But that's interesting that between, we talked about turnover percentage and 30th to 29th. The difference between the Wolves having the best defense in the league and the fourth best defense is being a top team in the league and being average, right? Like right now until they solve this offense. So I don't know. I not to harp on it again, but I keep coming back to this has been so much fun, but we're not even to like the midway point. And this season is a grind. And if you can take your blue and green hats off, like if you watched any other team play the type of defense the Wolves played for the first 25, 30 games, you'd be like, yeah, that's not sustainable. Like we'll give them a pass. So I do want to give them a pass here because it's hard to play that level of defense every single night, especially when your rotations are pretty solid and 6 or 7 guys are always going to play 25 to 30 minutes every single night. They don't rest players, right? Like this is Ant's missed a couple games, Carl's missed a couple games, Jaden. But if you can tie your shoes, you're going to play a lot of minutes. And I would imagine that defense comes back. Again, it's been bad and it's still awesome. But the offensive stuff, the turnovers, their inability to make threes, and then just that inability to, again, I know it's weird because I think Shake Milton has probably run its course with a lot of people that watch this team, but I just think they got to try some stuff again. And that's the whole purpose of this marathon is try a different pace for a couple miles. Try running faster, try running harder, like just try different people running the marathon and see what happens.
Yeah, it's right. The question come deadline will be, does this team need to add what of these three things? Backup point guard, movement shooter, or offensive bucket getter? And
I know my answer, by the way, and I think it's different. It's offensive bucket getter.
Yeah, no, I think that's what mine is too, actually. And it's close with movement shooter, but I think it's weird. The 3 guys on your bench that you're trading this around for are a backup point guard, a movement shooter, and a bucket getter.
And Jordan McLaughlin, Troy Brown Jr., and Shake Milton. I just Googled this last night halfway through the game. You knew the game was over.
But I mean, that's why, like, if you share the belief that Kyle and I do, and it's fine if you don't, I think a lot of people go, what the hell are you talking about? Like, this team obviously just needs shooting. But if you like the idea of a bucket getter or think that's the answer, then the internal temporary answer for that is Shake Milton. And that is,
it's cheap. I say this all the time from like an organizational standpoint. It's always cheaper to like promote from within than it is to go out externally and recruit and try to find. And I will say, last night at halftime when the bridges were burning, I just Googled 23, 24 NBA salaries, and Basketball Reference has a really cool page, and you can see every single salary for that year. And, Shake makes 5, a flat 5 per year. Kyle makes like 10. And you go look, and you're like, okay, do we need a backup point guard? Do we need a movement shooter? Do we need a bucket getter? Go look at some of those salaries. Like the names, I know we're getting into trade season. I know everyone loves Tyus Jones, and maybe they can pull that off. The problem is that there are 28 other teams that would probably have interest in him and can dangle draft compensation that the Wolves can't. But it's not the sexy thing because when things are going wrong, you just want new stuff. I mean, you know my wife, like just throws things out all the time. Let's get new stuff. Then that might not be the answer. The answers might be internally, and it might be there's your backup point guard, there's your bucket getter, there's your movement shooter, and I just think those guys need another chance because I don't know. Jaden's not the same right now. They also, because of the Gobert thing, a lot of teams always play like 4 shooters, right, and a non-shooter. The Wolves these last couple of weeks have almost always played at least 2 non-shooters: Jordan McLaughlin, Kyle Anderson, Rudy Gobert. And they just simply in 2024, you can't do that anymore. You have to have more guys out there that can put pressure on the defense. And they're not, a Jordan McLaughlin, Kyle Anderson, Rudy Gobert, Naz Reid, Jaden McDaniels lineup is just not going, it's going to grind teams out. It's like running the ball every play. That's not the way to fix this offense. So we'll see. We'll see if Finch does lean back into those guys. He's been pretty transparent about putting them in and pulling them back out, but that might be the answer. It might not be outside there. It might be inside the house. Let's
grab our final break here. Kyle, today's show is brought to you by Prize Picks. PrizePicks.com, Prize Picks app. It's a $100 sign-up bonus if you use the promo code Dane. Kyle, we normally do the NFL slate I have not been paying attention to the NFL this week. It's week 18. I don't really know who is in and out. Just quickly, do you have a couple NFL ones for you? I did two NBA ones. I said, give me Vassell over 19.5 tonight. They're on TNT, and I'll take Giannis under 34.5 points tonight against the Spurs. Do you have any quick NFL ones that you like?
Yeah, I got a couple notes here written down about Jeff Driscoll playing quarterback. No, the NFL ones are. This is gonna be the toughest week for anything, right? Yeah. There's so many bad. But
it's a fun way. It incentivizes if you're gonna be watching on Sunday. It's like
and it's probably there's some value in there that the books and the line setters of all these apps and websites, they don't really have a lot of details on Jeff Driscoll. So my favorite thing on the NFL side is to just go to like the rushing and receiving touchdowns, kind of find the little demons and just, pair a couple touchdown guys together. It boosts your odds. So if you say, Najee Harris is going to have a touchdown and maybe Dalton Schultz, right? Like I think that comes out to be 6-1. So you're literally just banking on touchdowns, but also too, that might be a fun way to watch a game is just keep an eye on it and see if these guys get in the end zone. So, pair any 2 touchdown scores that have a little red emoji next to them, and it's 6-1. So that's kind of fun.
$5, right?
Yep, that's
$5 and win 30 if that.
Then you can win. Then you can buy like 60 English muffins, right? Turnovers bad, English muffins good. So I love doing that. But yeah, the NBA, they have like Taco Tuesday. They have all these discounts. Fridays like Flex Friday. So there's fun ways to still play very low stakes, but get your money back, have insurance on top of that stuff, and just have a good time. And they're continuously finding more categories and more sports. So I really enjoy playing Prize Picks, and I appreciate that they support the pod.
Yeah, prizepicks.com. Prize Picks app, again, $100 sign-up bonus with promo code Dane. Kyle, very last thing, I know you got to get out of here.
No, we're good.
Get out of here pretty soon. We spent, honestly, probably too much time talking about the ninth men on on this team. I think just one of the answers here that doesn't answer every single problem about the spacing and this and that and the energy, whatever, is just getting November Karl Anthony Towns back. What do you think? What do you think makes that happen? That version, remember there was the long road trip, the Golden State. It was like that 6-game road trip. I think it ended with the Phoenix game, but you were like, it's like, okay, Karl's here. He started slow at the beginning of the season, and then that November kind of it was when you're like, okay, he's 50, 40, 90. He's all of these things. It really came back. How do you get that version of Karl back? Because that might be as good of an answer as anything to solve this team's issues.
Probably a physical therapist or a sports psychologist, because he's either going through something mental again. I mean, he had that Celtics game, which is probably the worst game of his season because it was just kind of all the bad stuff that Karl can do: low production, high turnovers, straight voltage. And since that exact game, he was awesome. And It went all the way until he hurt his knee, and then it has dovetailed since then. So, and I know we all see the injury reports and we talk to the coaches, but we don't actually know the health of these guys. We don't know their 0 to 100% energy bar.
Sure.
So is he still even?
There's a lot of KT tape on those knees underneath the tights, and he had the left knee soreness. I mean, that was the turning point in his production right. I mean, they said, Finch said we've been in second gear, falling off since the Sacramento game. The game Karl missed with left knee soreness was the Sacramento game. And then he, comes back and pretty clearly wasn't 100% for OKC and maybe still isn't totally that. I think that you're right. That might just be part of the answer is him, that knee stopping being sore, if it is still sore, to be able to have that burst, to take guys off the dribble again, like he was in November. You're right. Maybe some of it is just health.
Is it? But I'm being super serious here. Is it dumb to say or to think if he just took more threes, some of this, all the weird stats I've pulled for the last 12-game stretch, would at least be like if it was a zit, like you just pop it a little bit, like at least relieve some of the pressure? Because I know this can be made out to be more complicated than it is, and you and Britt can really dive into some of the details of it. But to me, it's just like, okay, so they turn the ball over a lot, That's sometimes Carl driving into what I just said was a very clustered paint right now because they're 28th in 3-points attempted. Like teams are thinking they're probably going to try to get to the rim. If he just lets it fly more, again, I know I joked about this. It was a joke, but I do like 2 or 3 times a game wonder if some of these guys are thinking about what their stats are. Like, is he thinking I'm 50, 40, 90? Because it would be better if that didn't exist or that club didn't exist. Like, just let it fly. And if you take 6 and you only hit 2 of them, I don't know if the 4 misses are bad. Like, do the 4 misses outweigh the 2 makes? I know that sounds really mundane, but just spreading the floor is going to help Ant. It's going to help Jaden. It's going to help Rudy. The lob to Rudy is, like, not there anymore. Like, that is just not a play. It doesn't matter if it's Kyle the unlocker, Mike speaking French. That play is no longer there, and that's because, like you said, the spacing is not there. And to get Carl back to November again, if he's got a lot of Kyle Teggy tape on him, like I don't know if he just needs to be rested for a game. I know that this team's just not going to do that, but
I think Kyle, he needs to figure out or be told what be put into a rhythm, right? And there's been a couple of the games, like the first possession of the game, right, has been like designed for a duck in for Cat. Like, I think they're trying to get Cat going early in games. I think what the confusion is, and my thought of this being confusion will be fueled by what Cat told me after the game. I'll play that clip in a second. I'm not sure Carl knows what his one best thing to do is for this team. We can think about all these other years, the Gerson, Rosas, Ryan Saunders year was Cat up at the top of the key. It's like, it's that weapon as the quarterback at the top of the key for the team. There's been years back with Tibbs where it was like the post. The year before Rudy got here was the pump and go game. I don't feel like Carl has that one thing right now or knows which one he should be aiming at to be his go-to offensive weapon to fuel his offense. I don't know what it is either. I asked him about it after the game, and it sounds like he's kind of trying to figure that out too.
Playing your individually best basketball, what do you think in those games you've been doing the most of this season?
Me, myself?
Yeah, you individually. Probably different than it was in previous seasons is what I'm kind of getting at.
I don't know. I just do whatever is asked, to get done, to be able to help my team and, just follow what the coaching staff has in plan for me that game. And, obviously sometimes it's going to be different. Like I said, right. Sometimes it's going to be, we ask you to get you 40, we're going to put the ball in your hands a lot more tonight. And I'm going to try and do that. And some other nights it's going to be like, get the ball and pass it around and get other people open. So, whatever the game plan is, I'm going to try to execute it as best as I can for my teammates and help.
You kind of know that in advance. There's kind of like an idea of the matchup and what that is going to push you to do offensively.
Yeah, I mean, you have a good idea of what the coaches want, and how they want the game to play out, and kind of how they, want me to play. So just do whatever it takes to win. Obviously, it's done pretty good for our record, so it may not be, all the time what fans want to see, but it brings the wins, and that's all we care about, bringing the fans.
I thought that was an interesting answer. Like he is, I don't think he knows what the answer to that is, because sometimes the answer is different matchup to matchup. I think they would do well. He would do well to have a go-to, or a fallback option, something. What did you think of that?
I mean, I'm thinking of pots and pans and how long Carl's been here, and my wife just wanted to get rid of and get new pots and pans. And that's, I think, how some people look at Carl. He's been here the longest, and I think he's the easiest one to criticize. This is just me. I just like him more than others, and I think those quotes, I thought all the quotes last night were not funny Pat Bev podcast quotes. They were just real. Like, I do think, and people don't like this, that I think he has sacrificed more throughout this whole thing, right? Like, it was, back to your Gerson Rosas stuff, like, it was his team. And I don't mean like in a weird dynamic. It was just he probably had a better understanding of what I need to do to win, even though they weren't winning many games when it was like him and D'Lo, him and Wiggins. And then you bring in Ant, and now that changes a lot of it. And now you bring in Rudy, and that changes it again. I think it was the Mavericks game, right? After Ant had the quotes about the OKC stuff or whatever, he's just going to shoot. And he came out in that first quarter, and he was just attacking. That was the Mavericks game, right? Mm-hmm. I actually thought that was detrimental. I would rather that be Karl just in the first quarter. Like, I would love for Karl to get 15 in the first. Like, let him be the establish the run type guy and finding specific play calls, not just flow, specific play calls. There was a couple times against the Knicks and the Lakers where they would call timeout and Finch ran awesome plays to get Karl a wide open three. They have the capability of doing that. And then let Ant be, your closer. Let Ant be the guy that comes in the fourth, and that's when he's going to get his 12 to 15. That, to me, is the correct formula for this team. I don't want to see Ant come out in kill mode because the first quarter is usually just feeling each other out. Let Karl...
Think about how many of the losses have started with that. I just even think of he scored the first 10 points of the season. No, I do. I'm saying, like, how many of the losses this season have started with Ant going off in the first quarter? The Raptors game, first 10 points of the season, I'm pretty sure, were scored by Ant. And you're right. And that's a tricky thing for Ant. To be fair, and probably some people are like, why the hell are you getting mad at Ant for starting the game?
Not getting mad at anyone. Like, no one is to blame for this. It's just there are guys that make more money. So, like, it is harder to trade Karl for the people that don't like Karl than it is to trade Kyle. But Kyle is easier, it's easier to move Kyle than it is Karl. So that's why he is on the top of potential trade lists, right? Like, I know the salary and the second apron and all that stuff, but for now, nothing has changed in my mind. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Nothing has changed in my mind that Karl is still, like, he is still the ceiling to all of this. And when he is comfortable, and his quotes last night just tell me a guy that's, like, overthinking. He just is in his own head. He doesn't really have a clear idea,
That's what I'm saying. That's why I wanted to play that. I don't do that to be like, Karl's lost, and that's a terrible thing. I said I play that and point to it to be like, Karl is still figuring out what his best ways to nightly impact this team are. And it's weird because they change. I think that's what he's saying is what they need me to do night to night at a position. I'm still learning and I'm being guarded by different types of players. And sometimes I'm getting doubled and sometimes I'm not. Like, he's still figuring out all of those things. And I do think that's something that if Karl being a 4 can work, like, I'm talking about big picture, if Karl being a 4 can work, it's going to come over the course of this season. And it's going to, and the offense is going to get better, and he's going to grow in a confidence, and it's going to be the first quarter stuff. And maybe from some of that confidence, then for the second and third quarters, he'll be more willing to space, and then guys can come in and it's more of an open floor. Like we've always said, the ceiling is with Karl. I think even just more immediately, he can break them out of this offensive fog. So we'll see. Next up is Houston on Friday. We're not going to have a Friday pod. After that is Dallas on Sunday. I will be at that game. I'm going on this road trip, Dallas, Orlando, Boston. So we're going to be recording some pods, be a little bit different of a week in that sort of way to maybe some more post-game pods. I know Britt's going to be on the road with me in Orlando. Chris will be there as well. So a lot more to come, but no more pods until Monday. We'll see how this team bounces back against the Rockets on Friday and Dallas on Sunday. Kyle, I appreciate you doing it.
They're 24-9. That doesn't mean that it's all roses, right? But they have built this lead in the marathon for a reason. They've played good ball. They have signature wins. They have played teams without their best player. They have played teams without Minnesota's best player. Mm-hmm. That's kind of the nature of this 82-mile marathon sprint, whatever. And I'm excited. I'm excited for you and Britt and others to get on the road a little bit because
I think it's a huge stretch right here.
I think February is all about a trade deadline and an all-star break and everyone going to Cabo, and then March is kind of like flipping the switch. I think January, historically, for this team and for every other team and every other season, January is the most interesting month of the NBA to me because that's when you really start to see how teams deal with the ebbs and flows, the adversity, all that stuff. And we're in it right now. So
Yeah, it'll be. I mean, it's part of the reason why I booked this trip a while back. I was like, I thought about it. I'm like, this is going to be a kind of defining stretch to me where they could really show me something too. And it's gonna be tough. It's gonna be probably Dallas back to full strength. I go to play Orlando in Orlando, a team that's played really well this season, into a back-to-back in Boston. It's an interesting energy to be entering it with, coming off of this first time losing 2 games in a row. But I'm fascinated to see how it plays out. So until Monday, he's Kyle at Kyle Teige on Twitter. I'm Dane at DaneMooreNBA. Thank you for subscribing to the YouTube channel and following all of our stuff on Instagram and TikTok at DaneMooreNBA _podcast. Until Monday, yes, he's Kyle. I'm Dane. Peace out.
How I'm feeling, man, I hope it never stop, yeah. Grinning hard so you can find me in the crowd, yeah. Don't let standards ever bring you down, yeah.